My name is Tressa. Some people call me Cooper, and I'm from Texas, a small little town called Florence. So I grew up in a small town, but I eventually made my way to the big city of Austin. And in 1999, I was abducted, raped repeatedly for hours, and strangled to death, not once, but twice. And I'm here to share not only that story, but also talk about what stepping through 25 years of PTSD looks like for women and looks like for families of sexual violent crimes, and kind of also talk about the re-traumatization from our justice system. So I'd like to start first by saying that a lot of my story can be super triggering, and just to prepare people that, this kind of stuff can be really, really triggering for some people. But I think the day before all of this happened, I had been in a pretty toxic relationship, and I had a child. During this time, I had a child. I had a child pretty young. So every one of my friends tell me, like, if it's going to go wrong, it's going to go wrong to you. So I got pregnant my very first time having sex. When I was 16 years old. And I had my son when I was 17. And he was such a gift to me and definitely pushed me forward. And, he saved my life in so many ways. I came from a very good family. I never experienced like mom or dad trauma. My dad was a very high-ranking officer in the Army. He was a pilot. So we moved around a lot. And I had a sister who had Down syndrome. So always, my family, my mother and dad are the most woke boomers there is. I've never met two of the most woke boomers. There were things that we never, and I would have to tell friends that came over, especially when we moved to Texas, small town, like, as you can imagine, right, certain words would come from their mouth. And I would have to warn them, do not step in my mom's house and ever say these words, because she will kick your ass out very quick. And, same with, gay relationships and stuff like that. They were so accepting. And I think that all stemmed from my sister, and that's just how we were raised, being very accepting of everyone. But my child's father and I had a pretty toxic relationship. We were young, not to say like he did bad, I did bad, but he never was connected to our son. He still isn't to this day. I think he's talked to him maybe 5 times in total. So right before this happened, I had been broken up for about 6 to 8 months from him. And I was finally like accepting it and moving on. And the day before, I was invited to a end of the quarter party. I worked for a huge computer manufacturing company in Round Rock, Austin, Texas. And I was invited to end of quarter. I was 21. It's my first career. I was super excited. So the night before, I went and bought a new outfit, new jeans, and this will all come relative to the story, but a mesh shirt that, a very thin, black top it was patterns of dragons all over it. And new Doc Martens. Keep in mind, this was in 99. So the style's kind of the same as it is today. But I will never forget that morning when I got dressed. And this was actually a life-saving moment. I put on my clothes. I was so excited to be able to attend the party after work. But one thing that I didn't buy brand new was a new belt. And the belt that I put on was so worn, it was almost going to fall apart. And I was really pissed off about it. Like, damn it, why didn't you buy a new belt? And I looked around for another one, but I couldn't find a black belt. You always have your star of the show, the black and the brown belt. And I just went with it. I, wore my old black belt, which ended up being a lifesaver. So I went to work and was so excited it was a work sponsored event. They were having it at a tavern after work, and went to the tavern. And after work, I ran out to my car and like reapplied my makeup and, fixed my hair a little bit. And I didn't really know anybody yet at work. I knew people, but I didn't really know them as friends. My ex, my child's father, and I both worked together there. And my dad also worked at this big, huge company. And like, I really never got to know people while I was there because my boyfriend was there, and, you just kind of have your own, that's who you would go to lunch with and stuff. So anyway, I was so excited. I ran out, put on, reapplied my makeup, fixed my hair, and drove over to the tavern. I was so excited to get to know people. And as I was walking in, I recognized one of the girls that I work with, and we said hello. And, we walked into the tavern together. And this is where it all starts. So I walk into the tavern, and at the time, one of my supervisors walked up to me with another man. Never talked to him ever before. He was a total stranger to me. But he walked up to me. Both of them walked up to me and this other girl. And the guy that I've never talked to before asked if I wanted a shot. Asked both the girl and I if we wanted shots. And I was a little intimidated by that, just because I didn't want to get drunk in front of coworkers. I was a little worried about that, but I didn't want to sound rude and say no. I was, I just turned 21 too.
Yeah.
So this happened at the end of April. My birthday is April 16th.
Okay.
So end of April, just turned 21. And I said, sure. Well, he walks up, him and the supervisor walk back over to me and the girl, and they have, a platter of shots, and the girl goes to grab a shot. And I will never in my life forget about this. But he said, no, this one's for her, and takes the shot and hands it to me, and then kind of passes around the other shots to, the three of them. And we all, sling back the shot. And within 5-10 minutes, I could tell something was wrong. The room was spinning. It almost felt like, kind of like you could feel like the pulsation from the music in your body. And I was like, what the hell is going on? And I immediately was anxious. I never really experienced anxiety and panic until after this. But during this, now I can identify I was anxious because I was so scared that one shot made me drunk, and I was going to be drunk in front of all of these people. So I excuse myself. I go into the women's bathroom, and keep in mind, this entire tavern's full of, my coworkers.
What time was it?
So this was like around 6 p.m.
It's crazy to me, though, like that atmosphere, to be willing to do that there. Like, I feel typically that happens. I mean, you hear about it more like in a nightclub setting, but I feel like that just goes to show, pretty risky.
Yeah. We'll wait until it gets bigger. So I walk into the women's bathroom, and I'm thinking, I'm going to go to the sink. I'm going to put water on my face. I'm going to walk out. Everything's going to be cool. And I'm going to have to call my dad, who was still at work, to come get me. And I'm just going to have to ride home with him because, I thought I was drunk. And probably the last thing that I remember when I was totally coherent was standing at the sink and looking in the mirror, just thinking, like, what am I going to do? And I must have passed out there, because the next thing I remember is being on the floor, and I could not move. I couldn't even open up my eyes. I could just hear I felt like I was in a closet almost, but clearly I was on the floor, but I could hear. And there were women walking over me, laughing, thinking I was drunk, and never stopping to say, "Are you okay? What can I do?" Well, then the supervisor and the guy comes in, and they said, "She's with us. We're going to take her outside to get some air." And they pick me up, both of them. And at this time, this time in my life, I was much younger and much thinner. And they pick me up and carry me out of the bar, walking amongst hundreds of people. Nobody stopped and said, "What's going on?" Take me outside, and they put me in. I can't identify whose truck it was, but they put me in a truck. And I was driven to the supervisor's apartment. And he lived, at that time, he had 2 roommates. One of them worked second shift, so he was still at work. And then the other one, he was supposed to be gone. This happened on a Friday night. He was supposed to be gone all weekend long. And so they took me back to that apartment. And keep in mind, I am drugged, and it felt like, the best way that I can explain it is, some of it was auditory, but some of it was, visionary too, where I could see things. But it almost felt, and I'm a very visual person, so the people listening, I think I can explain it in a way that people can understand, but it almost felt like flashes of a strobe light. But it felt like a strobe light that was going very slow. So, and I'll get to like where my PTSD triggers were, and what like really affected me by all of this was, I remember them throwing me down on, it was a green old couch, and hearing the supervisor say, "I'm going to turn the music up really loud so no one can hear the fun." And that's what he said. And he ended up ultimately leaving, but he turned up the stereo. Back then we didn't have speakers and, cell phones, but he turned up the stereo, and it was heavy metal music. He turned it up very loud. And, again, it flashes back. I don't remember anything until I feel the stranger on top of me. And at this time, he's pulling my shirt up. And another trigger for me is, again, I was young, and Victoria's Secrets was a big thing back in the day. And something that all of us would do was buy matching bras and panties, and something that I blamed myself for so long after this is, man, if I was just wearing ugly undergarments, he probably wouldn't have done this to me. Like, that's what turned him on, because the things he was saying when he pulled up my shirt and undid my pants, it just made me feel like, oh, that turned him on. But it's little things like that, that as a crime, a sex crime victim, that you remember, like pieces that is not important to anybody else, but, that you try to self-blame of, what could I have done to prevent this? And, over the years, I learned nothing. Yeah. He's nothing. His brain is not wired like any other man. He's a predator. There's nothing that you could have done differently. But in my head, I thought that. So he pulls up my shirt, and again, the flashes in of him saying, "You're sexy," kissing my breast, pulling my bra above, my breast. And then feeling a jerk of him pulling my underwear and my pants down at the same time. And then it flashes back to dark, where I don't remember, what happened after that. But I do remember there's flashes in and out of him being on top of me, the heavy breathing. Even when my husband breathes heavily now, I'm just like, stop it. But, it just stuff like that like I remember the heavy breathing and being thrown over the couch and being raped in every kind of way that you can imagine. So much to the fact, and I'll get into this later, but so much in the fact that I now have to have a lifetime colostomy bag because I was tortured, so brutally raped by him so horribly. The grace of all of it is that I had to recognize, like, at least I didn't have to be awake for a lot of it, but that also was so triggering because I don't remember the pieces. And as a human being, you want to be able to connect the dots and not have a memory lapse of the most traumatic thing that happened to you. So what happened in between the parts that I don't remember? And I'll never know. But there were different phases of the rape that got pretty bad. There was a part of where I started becoming coherent enough. And I don't know if it was a soda bottle or if it was a beer bottle or a wine bottle. I just remember it was glass. And I reached over and but my arms were like
your motor skills just weren't.
It just felt like rubber, right? And I remember grabbing the bottle and trying to hit him, in slow motion. So he, of course, grabs the bottle and it gets thrown on the floor and there's glass on the floor and whatnot. And now I'm awake. I remember this. I remember all of this very, and I don't know if this was flight or fight too, where I'm so amped up. And I knew that the next thing he was going to do is he was going to kill me. I'm grabbed from the living room and I'm pulled across all that glass and stuff on the floor, pulled into, and it was an apartment. So there was like a galley kitchen and like a little dining room that was next to the galley kitchen. And then there was the living room. So I was pulled into that galley, kitchen, dining room area. And the next day, at this time, I'm on my stomach. So I'm totally naked. I'm on my stomach. And I just remember pressure on my back. And during this time, he had grabbed my belt, the worn belt. And he had put it around my neck. And he started choking me or strangling me with my belt. And the belt was so damn worn, it broke.
Wow.
And that was saving grace one.
Yeah.
That I knew now I was going to have to fight for my life. And he got up and I started trying to move away. My shirt is out of out of the armholes, but it's around, the neck hole. The shirt's kind of budged around the collar. And I think that he just thought fast, and it was a mesh shirt, so it's super stretchy. And he grabbed, he pushed me kind of back on my stomach, jumped on my back again, and pulled that shirt, and bunched it up and was trying to strangle me that way. And by this time, I was seeing stars. I was going in and out. And I do remember this part of it kind of in that fight, freeze mode. He is going to kill you unless you play dead. You're never going to get home to your son. Your mom's already buried 2 kids. You can't let her bury another one. And immediately going into the freeze mode. So he strangled me. I did go out for a brief, I don't know how long. I passed out. But when I came to, he was still strangling me. So my entire body went limp. And I remember just telling myself, you have to be stoned. Just be stoned. Just be stoned. And I thought it was over from there. He got off of me and I thought I made it out. But then it wasn't over. He turned around and the police then said that and I guess he confessed to this, of the reason why he did this was to make sure that I was dead. He urinated on me and to see if I would move. And I didn't. So I have this man that just brutally raped me, tried to strangle me, not once, but twice, now urinating on me. And I just knew I had to get home to my child. And again, I couldn't let my parents bury a third child. So or by this time, my sister hadn't passed away yet, but another child later, a couple years later, my sister passed away, and we'll talk about that. But yeah, I went totally limp, didn't move. He thought I was dead. He left the apartment, and evidently when he left, so that third guy that was supposed to be gone for the weekend, if I could ever find him, his name's Mars. He was the most magical person. I don't know if it was a guardian angel or just divine energy. I don't know what it was. But he decided last minute, I'm not going to leave tonight. I'll leave tomorrow morning.
Did he work? Did he work with you guys?
Yeah, he worked with us too.
So did he know who you were?
He did know. I knew who he was. He knew who I was. We talked like maybe once or twice, but it was more like, hey, can you hand me that? It was just like professional banter. Okay. It wasn't.
So he lived in this apartment with
the supervisor and then another guy that all worked at.
Okay. But not the one that did this to you. He didn't live there. Okay.
He did not live there.
And then a couple questions before you continue, so I don't forget. Supervisor left at what point?
Supervisor left as soon as he turned up the stereo after he said, I'm going to turn the stereo up. I'm going to turn the music loud so nobody can hear the fun in here.
So basically he was just involved in this to help this guy.
Yep.
And they were friends, I'm assuming.
They were good friends.
Okay, but he never did anything to you other physically.
Not that I know of, and there was no traces by this time. And with DNA, there was no traces of his DNA on my body. It was just.
It just makes me wonder, also, what did this guy think after thought he killed you? Mm-hmm. What did he think?
He actually left to go find where he was going to dispose my body.
Okay. So that's why he left.
He left. And again, I don't know how this happened. He left and I was laying on the kitchen floor and I still was scared of did he just go down to his car? What's going on here? And I'm trying to figure out, what am I going to do? There's blood all around me because keep in mind, I've been attacked. I've been drugged through glass. There's blood all around me. I'm totally naked except for the shirt around my, bunched up around my neck. And I had my eyes peeked open. So just in case he was still, I heard him leave because they lived on the second floor. So I heard the apartment door close. He turned off the stereo. He turned off the stereo, opened up the door, and then closed the door. And then I heard him walking down the steps because the apartment was on the second floor. So I heard all of that. So I knew he had left. But then again, I was like, what if, this other person was here in another room and he's the one that left. But I knew the entire time it was only one person that was attacking me.
Okay.
Every time that I would come, it was the flashes of the strobe light. I would see his face. I would hear his breathing. I would hear his voice. He was the one that pulled me into the galley kitchen dining room area. There was no question. It was just him.
I'm sure also, when you realized he left, there was probably some sort of fear of, does my body even work? Can I even, if I wanted to get up and run, can I even do it? Right.
And you don't trust your body after that kind of situation because your body just, and your brain just failed you, because you think that you're, up until that point, I thought, there were no monsters in this world that would, I'm smarter than the monster, right? And, you know, immediately shame kind of seeps in after that kind of violence. But he left within no more than 5 minutes. This is when the roommate walks in, and my eyes are kind of peeked open, and I knew him, but here I am laying naked on the floor, blood around me. I didn't give a shit. I was like, I've got, like, right now is your time to get out. And again, we're in this apartment building, and I'm like, if I start screaming loud enough, maybe somebody will hear me. So I see him, and I just start screaming and screaming and screaming. And I could tell he's processing, like, what's this naked white girl doing on my floor? Bloodied mess. Like, what the hell is going on right now?
Hi guys, just a reminder that my merch is live and you can use code INSANE10 for 10% off your order. All you have to do is go to we'reallinsane.com. Okay, so if you are anything like me, then you care a lot about what you feed your dogs. You want to feed them the best of the best, but at the same time, you don't want anything that's messy, complicated, or literally takes up your entire freezer. And this is why I love Sundays. Sundays is real air-dry dog food that is made in a human-grade kitchen with no fillers, no junk, and all ingredients that you can recognize. It was created by veterinarian and mom, Dr. Tori Waxman, who was just sick and tired of seeing all these different dog food brands that were labeled as premium, but still included ingredients that you couldn't pronounce. They were just still full of fillers and junk, and overall just not making a noticeable difference in her dogs. And something that I love most about it is how easy it is to serve. It is completely uncomplicated, not messy at all, no prep, not taking up any space in my freezer, which is a huge must for me. And I feel like a lot of people feed kibble to their dogs for the convenience aspect of just scooping and serving, but now you don't have an excuse because Sundays is served the exact same way. You just scoop and serve. Ever since switching my dogs over to Sundays, I noticed such a big difference in their overall health when it comes to their coat, their breath, their poops, their energy levels, and literally everything in between. And I have a lab and a golden, and when it comes to shedding, the food makes a big difference. Make the switch to Sundays. Go right now to sundaysfordogs.com/insane50 and get 50% off your first order. Or you can use code insane50 at checkout. That's 50% off your first order at sundaysfordogs.com/insane50. sundaysfordogs.com/insane50 or use code insane50 at checkout. All right, so I'm sure all of us are very familiar, unfortunately, with the feeling of doing everything right, whether that's working out, eating clean, getting enough rest, but during your day, you just still feel so depleted and so tired, and you feel like you're doing all the right things, but nothing is working. And I have come to realize that it's not necessarily always about the things you're doing that are correct, but more so about what is happening inside of your cells. And that is why I've been adding MitoPure gummies from Timeline into my daily routine, and it's even better because they taste amazing. The easiest way to look at what these gummies do is they are basically helping to recharge your cells and support cellular energy, which plays a huge role in how we feel as we age. I am all about simplicity over here, so if I can just easily throw something into my routine that I already have, count me in. It's super simple. All I do is take 2 gummies a day with all of my other vitamins. If you're not somebody that takes anything else, you could literally put it right next to your toothbrush and remember to take it in the morning. And like I mentioned before, they taste good, so you're actually gonna look forward to taking them. And just to give you a little bit more info, they are also super clean. They are vegan, sugar-free, non-GMO, and they are backed by over 15 years of research, which is so important to me. And overall, I love that I am just supporting my cells and my body at a deeper level, and that I'm not just chasing that energy feeling on the surface. Support your cells and how you age with MitoPure gummies from Timeline. Visit timeline.com/insane and save up to 39% off your MitoPure gummies. That's timeline.com/insane.
And he walks over to me, and he was like, Tressa? And I said, yeah. And he was like, you're okay, calm down. He just knew, like, and he said, who did this to you? And I said that, and unfortunately I can't say the offender's name publicly, and you guys will find out why later in the story. He did go to prison. I will share that, fast forward. He did go to prison for many years, but he's out now, and there's a reason why I don't say his name publicly until he dies. But he said, who did this to you? And I will say anyway, who did this to you? And I said his name, and he said, we have to call the police. And again, I just had been brutal. Like, I remember the fear and so scared. And I said, no, 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 no. Can you just take me to my dad? My dad's, and I don't even know how I knew this. My dad's only a block away. And he was like, where's your dad? And I said, I told him my dad's name is Lon Cooper. He works here. He's in this building. And he's like, oh, yeah, that is only a block away. He's like, but we should call the police. And I said, no, I don't want to call the police right now. I just want to can you just get me to my dad? And then the truth kind of set in, because you still feel like you're kind of in this dream-like state of, is this real? And I remember him saying, like, we need to get you dressed. And he grabbed my pants, and my pants were inside out, and my underwear was like on one side, on one leg, and they were badly ripped. So obviously he like tore off my, tight jeans and underwear with it. But when I saw that, it like, you have, again, those flashes of like, no, this is real. This is reality. This just happened to you. You're not dreaming right now. This really did happen. So I saw the pants and the underwear, and by this time I'm looking all around because, again, I was kind of in and out during the attack. By this time so it started at 6. By this time it's around like 8:30, 9 o'clock. My dad was still at his office. My dad retired from the military and went to go work at this company as like, I think he was a director or something like that. But he worked so they had shifts at this place. They had first shift, second shift, third shift. I worked on first shift. My dad worked on second shift. So my dad was still there. Okay. And I'm looking around, and by this time, like I said, this all started at 6. This was around 9:30. And it might have been a little earlier. I'm trying to remember. I know it was definitely like 2-3 hours from the start of the attack until this. But I remember seeing my broken belt on the ground, and you have like that split second of sanity of like, that motherfucker just saved my life. I was bitching about it this morning, and it saved my life, because if it didn't break, if it was a brand new belt, he would have had, and he wasn't using a mesh shirt that was stretchy, but an actual belt to strangle me, he would have succeeded, no doubt. But because the belt broke and all that he had left was my mesh stretchy shirt, I survived it. But I remember looking at the broken belt and being thankful for it during all of this trauma. It just being like rationalizing and realizing like that thing just, that like not buying a brand new belt last night actually saved my life. And I was so mad at myself for not buying a brand new belt that morning. And anyway, like, just destiny works in weird ways. But he helps me get dressed, and I remember there was still glass on the floor and stuff like that. And he was like, you need to put on your shoes. I still have my socks on. I do remember that. And back in the late 90s, early 2000s, socks were like, patterned socks were everybody's thing. They haven't made a comeback. At least I don't think they have. My daughter's 22 and she never talks about socks, but like trouser socks with weird patterns or stripes or whatever, you'd always wear them with your Oxford Doc Martens and let them peek through your jeans a little bit or whatever. But I remember looking down, I was wearing striped black and white socks, and he grabbed my shoes and said, you should put on your shoes. And I know I was starting to disassociate, and I was doing this for a long period of disassociating. I just kind of stood there still, and he pretty much carried me out of the apartment across the grass to his car, put me in his car, drove a block, and that led me to where everything, the new part of the story started. And that was pulling up and him going out and screaming for my dad to come outside. My dad comes outside. And my dad and I have talked recently about this because, again, I was so disassociated. I was in total shock. My body was just responding to outside stimuli. I was so incoherent. But I remember, so some of this is my dad's words and some of it's mine, but my dad ran out and he ran over to my car, or over to the guy's car, opens up the passenger door, and he can tell like I'm not okay. And he asked what happened. And I said I was raped. And I do remember my dad screaming back to the building, someone called 911. And that's when 911 was called. So they didn't initially, there was a search warrant and stuff like that produced after, but they come to the company, and people will learn why I can't say the company's name. I would share it, but I legally can't. You'll learn why. But the police ambulance show up. Now rewind, I've been broken up with my boyfriend for 8 months at this point. He already has a new girlfriend. Something about him is he was a habitual cheater through our entire relationship. And that was kind of the saga with him is he, I had my son with him, but he just never felt connected because he was always looking at, the next person. But he just cheated all the time. We were young, whatever, but he was still an asshole. He would cheat all the time. There was one of my best friends in high school. She's a horse girl. When I was pregnant with my son, this is how dirty he was. And this is important to the story so everybody can feel like what an asshole move this was while I'm in this very traumatic part. I just want people to feel it. But when I was pregnant with my son, him and my best friend in high school, I had one of those folding mattress things for my room. She slept on that and he was in my room, and he had spent the night and she had spent the night. And they slept together. They had sex right next to me while I was sleeping, while I was like 7-8 months pregnant. So he was the classic asshole. He was that kind of guy, just not a stand-up guy. And anyway, so to build the picture of this part, he also worked second shift at the same company, and him and his new girlfriend were walking out as the police show up, and they see my dad out there, and Casey runs over, Casey's my ex.
Are you fine saying the name?
Yeah, I'm fine saying the name. Runs over to my dad and said, what happened? And my dad explains to him what happens. And Casey, and I really like his girlfriend and they ended up breaking up, but her and I became cool with each other. But her name's Amy. He tells Amy to stay with me and go to the hospital with me. So instead of him going to the mother of his child going to the hospital with me, he sends his new girlfriend because she was the only other female there. So the police are there, the ambulance are there. They're saying, we need to take you to the hospital to do a rape kit. During this time, Crime Victim Services, they ask if I want Crime Victim Services to come and they'll help support me during the process. And I said, yes, sure. So they get me transported over to the hospital. My dad's following behind the cartel of people going to the hospital. And I'm in the ride with 2 women. I had no idea who it was, and like paramedics and stuff like that. But Amy and the sex crime victim services counselor, and they're holding my hand and like which was lovely. I'm not saying that wasn't a lovely deal, but I already felt so violated, and there was nothing more that I wanted than I wanted my mom. I just want, like, my mom has always been my go-to person, and my mom and my other sister Denise, I just wanted them in that moment. I just wanted my mom and my sister, and my dad happened to be with us, which I love my dad. And again, I came from a very good family, but I just wanted my mom and my sister. But I had it was nice. They took me to the hospital. We were put into a room, and to paint the picture for the listeners and the viewers is now there's another violation that happens to a sex crime victim where you're now exposed again. You have to stand on a white sheet, and they have you disrobe layer by layer. And, first you take off your shoes and you put them in a paper bag. Take the paper bag off, paper bag away. They put down another paper bag. Your socks, you're just disrobing in this room that has, the Amy and the victim services person stayed back in the other room. So they took me to the exam room. And so now there's nurses, they call them a SANE nurse. So it's a sex assault nurse examiner. So they call it SANE, which is ironic. Mm-hmm. But they call her, she was in there, and she was also training someone. So there was another nurse in there. And then I think there was 3 in total that I remember. There might have been more, but I remember 3 faces. So you're kind of exposed. You're already violated. You're under big, bright lights. You're on this white sheet, having to get naked yet again in front of total strangers. And it feels so cold because it feels almost mechanical of, okay, this comes off, this goes in the paper bag. Okay, this person takes off the paper bag. Now another paper bag comes off. Now you have to take off, whatever. Well, then you're standing there totally naked in front of 3 people. And then you have someone from the police department. And for me, it was a female. And I'm sure that they do this. But I'm standing there naked, and they have to take pictures. Mm. And because I had physical injury, I had, cut to my back, there was rug burns all over me. So they had to take, pictures of physical injury. And then I remember, for women, you guys know the good old OBGYN tables, and having to put my legs up. And again, just more violation of, having to be swabbed in every orifice. Because he urinated on me, they took a clipping of my hair. And this is all for DNA testing. I remember the same nurse making a statement saying, wow, he really messed you up, while she was looking, and and there's this big... They also have a kind of an ultrasound. It's transvaginal thing. And there was blood all over my lower half, and her making that statement. And I was definitely in pain, but
you're probably still in shock.
The shock outweighed the pain, right? I wasn't feeling it
right
too bad. But she made that statement. And then the next violation was having to tell my story over and over and over again. So first the SANE nurse asked what happened. Well, first you have the sex crime, the police that show up to the actual site. They asked me what happened. I had to tell that story. Then crime victim services, to make sure that I qualified for services, had to ask me what happened. Then you get to the hospital, and you have the SANE nurse that asks you what happened. And then because I physically was injured, they had a doctor come in, had to tell the doctor what happened. Now the sex crime investigators show up. So you have maybe 2 or 3 more people that you have to tell. And I think that was the first time that I realized, now we kind of have a word for it, gaslighting, right? But back in like the late 90s, early 2000s, there was really no word for it. But I think so remember the roommate that showed up and was the one that found me? He was a black male. The person that did this to me, he was Hispanic, and the supervisor was white. And
what were the ages of the supervisor and
so good question. So he like in their 40s. Okay. And I just turned 21. So they were about 20 years older. I never talked to them. Like we had nothing in common, you know? And anyway, I will never forget the investigator saying to me, well, how do you know that it wasn't the guy that found the black male? How did you know? And keep in mind, my parents were very woke, very woke. And so, what was his name? Rodney King. I remember as a kid, the whole Rodney King thing with the LA police had really beat up this guy pretty badly. And there was big, huge riots in LA. And my mom saying, how, like identifying how the police treat specifically black males. And she was a nurse, and she even said, in the medical field, how they treat black people. Very, very progressive parents. And they started gaslighting me and saying, how do you know it wasn't him? And I'm like, listen, I know who I saw. He wasn't there. It was this, this specific guy. He was there the entire time. The supervisor's the one that brought me with him. Talked to the supervisor and this person. That's who was there. The Mars, who was the black man who found me, had nothing to do with it. I assure you, had nothing to do with it.
And even though you weren't fully coherent throughout the process, I think our bodies still know.
It absolutely.
Yeah, I think you would be terrified.
You want to hear I remember that night, my mom, it was such a shitty time because my grandma, who I was also very close with, was really, really sick. She lived in New Mexico, and my mom was up in New Mexico taking care of her. So I didn't even get to come home to my mom. I had to talk to her on the phone. And my sister, of course, was home and stuff like that. But, my sister's always we're only 13 months apart. I always grew up with her as my best friend and someone to lean on and all of that. But my mom was kind of I would run things by her and see what she thought and whatnot. But I think for people that experience, especially right after, all that you want to hear is, I believe you. As a victim, I believe you.
Yeah.
And here I am. Obviously, I had been raped. I had, been strangled, all of that stuff. And I felt the need to prove that I was raped to these detectives. And sadly, that still is going on for many victims today. And I remember going home and I can't remember if it was that night, and we'll talk about when I got home and stuff like that and the aftermath of that. But I do remember calling my mom and saying, the police think it's the black male, the black guy that lived there. And I keep on telling them, no, it's this person. And they're not listening to me. And my mom said, I believe you. And she said, it sounds like they're not wanting to do a thorough investigation. And we'll get in this. Now, keep in mind, we'll talk about that later. But I remember my mom saying, I believe you. And that's all I needed to hear to give me a little bit more fuel to keep on pushing. By this time, I've told the story probably 10 times the first night that after this happened. When you're at the hospital, I'm sure it's the same way. So when I was at the hospital, they gave me Plan B that I was supposed to take. They gave me Valium, and they gave me like antibiotics in case I had contacted an STD through this stuff. So I had 3 pills. I'm, by this time I'm 21, don't really take, medicine. And, I'm advised to see a doctor because of the internal injuries, but they got me, I just wanted to go home. So I get in the car with my dad, and I don't know where my car is at this time. Remember, I drove over to the tavern, and I asked him, I was like, do you know where my car is? And I don't know how this happened, but somehow the girl that met me, that I walked into at the tavern, he's like, oh yeah, this girl asked if she could take your car, and she's going to park it in, the company's parking lot, so it's safe. Which was fine. Like she was being nice about it.
So
but
pause a second. You were you'll answer this, but you were the only one that they put the drug into the shot for?
Mm-hmm.
And do you find out why?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So you'll tell us that. And then the girl that was there, like...
she was a nice girl. And like after she found out what happened to me, I honestly, I need to ask my dad about that, because I don't know how all of this came about, where she found out what happened to me, because it all happened in the same night, where she found out what happened to me.
But like there.
But she got my car. She got the car keys because I had my car keys, I think, in my pocket or my purse or whatever. I had it with me when I got to my dad. And I think she was like, do you want me to move Teresa's car from the from the bar to...
But she didn't see the guys carrying you out?
That's what it never made sense. She said just no. Because I know the detectives asked her, and she said that she didn't. That after I excused myself, like she went off to go play pool and stuff like that with other coworkers. But she said no, she didn't see it. Other people admitted that they saw me being carried out.
Okay. But
she said that she didn't. So I get home, and I asked on the drive home, I asked my dad, where's my car? And he said it's up at the company's parking lot. And he tells me so-and-so took it. I don't even remember her name. This young lady took your car from the bar to the parking lot. But my dad and I don't talk. I didn't want to talk. I don't think my dad wanted to talk. It was just that.
It's like, what do you say?
Well, and it was comforting. The stillness and the silence was comforting, because we both kind of understood. Like, to be fair, my dad also experienced seeing his daughter was just attacked and strangled. That had to be traumatizing for you. Like, I'm a parent now. I was a parent then, but not of adult children. I'm a parent of adult children now. But understanding the pain that he must have been feeling, I get why he was so quiet. And I also understand why I was so quiet. So it was comforting. Yeah. It didn't feel like embarrassment or anything like that. We both kind of felt each other like, there's nothing that we can say right now. Let's just get home, and I knew I was safe and all of that.
How were you feeling as far as the aftermath of the drug that they gave you?
I was still pretty loopy.
Okay. Did they tell you? I'm sure the hospital tested you. And
yeah, I did a urine test, and I can't remember. I mean, it's been 25 years now, and I'm sure it's in my case file, but I can't remember if it was GHB or Rohypnol. And keep in mind, back in the day, that was very common for women to experience that at bars. That was just getting progressively worse.
Okay.
But it happened in bars where complete strangers, you went out to the bar with your friends, and somebody would drop it into your drink. And, you
don't think it's going to happen at a work event.
Right, exactly.
At 6 p.m.
Never once did I think, hey, I'm going to a work event. I'm going to be drugged and
Right.
abducted and raped for hours and left for dead never once crossed my mind. I don't think it would cross anybody's mind, even today. But it was coming up, it was progressively getting worse at bars.
Yeah.
And I even remember my mom making comments to my sister's 13 months older than me, making comments to my sister like, hey, the news is saying that women should always protect their drink and carry their drink around with them and, all of that. And the reason why he gave me the shot, and we'll get into how it was kind of pre-planned, but a lot of people that would do this, because taking a drink, you can leave the drink, you can, taste something funny in the drink and decide you don't want to drink anymore. But what men were doing was they were putting them in shots, because you take the shot fast. So it's like, right away.
Yeah, you can't spit it back out.
You can't spit it out, I mean, I guess you could, but, they were putting them in shots. So that was pretty common back then. It wasn't that they kind of quit putting them in people's drinks and they put them in shots. Mm-hmm. And my mom would always tell my sister that, and I had just turned 21. I had my mom knew. I know that she had to know, but I had a fake ID. Like, I had been drinking, going to the bars and stuff like that with my sister. I've never been a big drinker, but, I would hear my mom always telling my sister, like, watch your drink.
Yeah.
They're putting them in shot glasses, all of that. So I knew better. Anyway, so we get home. My best friend, Anthony, is at my house. My sister, my best friend, Anthony. I think there was a couple of other friends too that were there, but I specifically remember my sister and Anthony there. And he had come over because Denise, my sister, I can't remember. Was Cindy born? Yeah, Cindy was born then too. But she had a little girl at home. She didn't live at home with us anymore. She had moved out with her boyfriend. But she had to go home and take care of her child. So my best friend Anthony came over to watch my son Taylor, and while I was at the hospital. So when I got home, my sister had returned. Anthony was there. There was a couple of other friends there too. I can't remember who all was there, but I do remember Denise and Anthony. And I came in, nobody knew what to say. So that kind of starts the silent mode and the victim feeling as if you can't say much because you don't want it to be too heavy for the rest of everybody else and be that burden.
Which I think at least in turn is isolating.
Incredibly. The silence is deafening, and it only adds to your pain. And I had to learn that, and I think every victim goes through that. Every victim that I've spoke to has gone through the silent period. And sometimes it can last, a couple months. Sometimes it can last decades. It depends. But nobody really knew what to say other than, I'm really sorry. And my sister left and our other friends left, and Anthony stayed with me. And Anthony, the thing about Anthony is I always had until I met my son's father, I always had a very big crush on Anthony. We were best friends, but he was just he was a beautiful, he still is just beautiful. He looks like an Abercrombie and Fitch model. Just like all American, blonde hair, blue eyes. Everybody at school had a crush on Anthony. It wasn't, I was no different from any other girl, but we became best friends. We were together all the time. We would hang out together. And my Casey, the father of my son, I could tell he was jealous of Anthony, but he never really said much. You could just tell like there was, I understood the boundaries. Keep in mind, I've been broken up with this guy for 8 months, so there was no more boundaries. Anthony was there, and I remember sitting on the back porch, and by the time I got home, it was like midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning. We're sitting on the back porch and I'm crying uncontrollably. I'm trying to explain to him, like everybody had left, so it was just he and I, explain to him what happened. And he said, the hospital gave you Valium. I think you should take some, and I think you should go and get some rest. I will take care of Taylor tonight. Just go and get some rest. This is too much, kind of thing. As you know, people that know Anthony, he's not a man of many words, but that night he was a really good friend. So I took the Valium and I fell asleep. And around 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, and Anthony was like, again, I had this fold out mattress in my room. And so Anthony and I were in there, and Casey ends up showing up that night after he got off of work and all of that. So it's like maybe 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. And I hear yelling outside of my room, and it's Anthony and Casey going back and forth at each other because Casey wanted to wake me up to talk to me. And Anthony's saying, no, she has had the worst night. And where the fuck were you? So they were definitely going back and forth, like yelling at each other. And Anthony was basically telling him, you're not going to wake her up. She has had the worst imaginable thing happen to her, and let's let her sleep. Casey didn't want that to happen. So I don't know if I came out of the room or Casey came in the room, but he asked me if at my house we have this big, huge porch with, really comfy chairs and stuff like that. And he asked me to go sit out on the porch with him so that we could talk. And, he was just like, I'm really sorry that this happened to you. I hate that this happened to you. It really tore me up. Keep in mind, he didn't go with me to the hospital. He put his new girlfriend in the car with me. And he's like, I just wanted you to know that after work today, I talked to Amy and we broke up. And I think you and I should get back together because I can never let this happen to you ever again. Again, I'm disassociated. I just want to feel safe. I want to be taken care of.
Now's not the time for this.
Absolutely. But I fall for it. And again, we had that pattern of getting, breaking up, getting back together. That's just kind of how that's how toxicity works, and not to say I never cheated, but I was toxic in my own measure too. So we were young, stupid kids. It's one of those relationships that you look back later in life and you're like, thank God that did not work out. I always tell girls that are going through breakups, I'm like, one time you're gonna
look back at it and understand.
You're gonna understand why that didn't work out, and you're gonna be grateful. I promise. Just get through the pain. You'll be okay.
I have a quick question before you go into that part. When you were at the hospital that night, did they tell you that night that do you still currently have a colostomy bag? Did they tell you that night that you were going to need one, or you didn't know yet until down
I didn't
the road?
know until I saw a specialist.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah. So they knew that I had been they knew that there was a lot of physical damage.
Okay.
I was stitched up, that kind of stuff. But there was not, a specialist had not looked at me, like a colon rectal surgeon had not looked at me just yet.
Okay.
So, but anyway, Casey's asked to get back together. I'm freaking either disassociated or delusional. And I'm like, okay, whatever. And so this happens in April. Over the next several months, there's the behind the scenes thing where I'm having to go into, by this time my mom comes home from my grandma's house, and my mom's this Italian fierce lady that no one's gonna fuck with her kids, and she does not take shit from no one, and she doesn't give herself enough credit, but she has such a powerful voice, and just she's just. And my dad has been incredibly successful in his career. He too has a powerful voice, but don't ever mess with a mom whose kids are getting messed with. don't ever do it, especially an Italian mama. Anyway, I remember maybe a week after all of this, I have to go up to talk again to tell the story because they have to get it all written down. But they gave me some time, and I told the detectives I really want my mom to be with me. My mom, my sister, and my best friend, Carrie, go with me to the police station, at the Austin police station. And I walk in, and now they have kind of soft interview rooms where, you know, there's for victims, there's couches. It's not this whole, you know, very cold interrogation room. It's a soft room. But back then they did have cold interrogation rooms where your offender probably was sitting too, right? I'm taken back to her space, the room, and my family can't. I'm thinking my sister, my mom, and my best friend can go with me and be supportive while I tell my story of what all happened for the 50th time now. And I was told, no, you are the only one that can go. So in your mind, you're already starting to feel like, again, I have to prove myself that this happened. But now I have my mom with me. And I also came from my family's well off. We're, white, upper middle class. My mom basically told the detective, we want a thorough investigation on this. And I'm not, basically, I'm not going to get off your neck until you make sure that my daughter gets the justice she deserves.
And in this time span, did they arrest the guy?
Well, that's coming next.
Okay.
So we get to the police station. Like I said, I'm trying to put together the line. Let's say a week later. It might have been, 4 days, but I'm saying a week.
They did not arrest him right away.
No, they couldn't find him right away.
Okay.
And also back then, well, I'll get to that. So what happened, I go in, and this is the weird thing, and maybe other crime victims, I don't care if you're a crime victim or sexual violence, DV, whatever it is, but I have seen the Polaroid picture that they took of me that day that I went into the police station to tell my story. And this is something that really screwed with me for many, many years later. And I finally had to have a therapist explain it to me. But, I tell my story again. I have to sign this, my formal statement, have to make sure that every single part, even though I've told my story so many times, it has to be now in writing, and I have to sign it, and everything needs to be in there because that's what's going to the prosecution. And the DNA has been submitted to the lab. It can take up to 6 months before it gets back. I'll share a really cool full circle moment in a second. But she takes a picture, and she's like, she took a picture of my breast because, I had bruising and all of that all over me, but there was bruising also on my breast. And she wanted to, like, around my nipples and whatnot, she wanted to take a picture of that. So I allowed her. And she had made the statement, well, they were able to collect, there was DNA all over me. And she's like, I need to take a picture of your breast because another part that all the areas that we collected DNA, one of the parts too was the saliva on your breast. Aside from, just semen and urine, his saliva was on your breast and around your mouth. And then she was like, and, I'd like to take a picture so that I could put it on the case file of you. And so she did a face picture of me. And I was fucking smiling in that picture. And that really fucked with me. Because I'm like, when I opened up the case file years later and saw that, it was the shame, and I was so mad. I beat myself up so much. This is maybe 3 or 4 years later. that I was angry with myself. How dare was I smiling when I had just been through literal hell? Why was I smiling? And so angry at myself for going through that disassociation state. And I had to have a therapist explain to me, what do you do when someone puts a camera in your face? And I said, smile, try to, put my hair, try to look presentable, and I'll smile. And she goes, why is that any different when she put a camera in your face? We're just kind of wired that way. Somebody puts a camera in your face. It's not an afterthought. You smile because that's kind of how, since we were little kids, smile for the camera. Why are you beating yourself up over this? So finally I had to process that and let it go. But it's just little things like those nuances throughout your trauma that come back, and like it's kind of like a haunting feeling, like you'll feel like you're moving past something and just one thing can pull you back into it. But I'd gone and I'd given my statement, signed it, and then the waiting period started. However, so this all started, and I had taken off FMLA. This happened in April. I didn't go back to work until August. And the company told me, because he was still working there, he had not been arrested. In fact, what he did was he told the police department, and they had to wait until the DNA test came back. He got an attorney, and basically he said, I never touched her. I don't know what you're talking about. I never touched her. So we had to wait for the DNA to prove, you're a fucking liar, dude. You're a predator. You did touch me. So he didn't get arrested. His attorney stepped in and basically told the police department, like, you have no proof to arrest him.
And supervisor didn't get in trouble for helping?
Supervisor did not get in trouble.
At all?
At all.
Had he helped? Do you find out that he had helped him before in these kind of things, or was that his first time?
I think that was his first time. When they were doing the investigation, they had talked to several people that we worked with, because in the state of Texas, the other interesting thing is I never talked to him. I had seen him, but I had never talked to him. He was pretty much he was a stranger to me. Never had a conversation, never said hi, hello, nothing. Mm-hmm. Total stranger. But in the state of Texas, even if you've seen someone, because we worked together, they didn't classify him as a stranger. Mm. So it was like, apparently prior to the tavern incident, he had been going around and asking different coworkers that, I would talk to. We were not we were friendly, but we weren't friends or anything like that. But he was asking them if I was going to attend the party. And everybody said, yeah, she's coming. And he asked probably 4 or 5 different people if I was coming. And then the day of, he had asked someone else, is Tressa coming to the party? And she was like, yes, I've told you, Tressa's come to the party. And he said, well, is she going to eat dinner before, or is she just coming straight to? And the girl said, he learned about my son. She's like, well, she has a son at home. I think she's going right after work and maybe only going to stay an hour or two. And then she has to go home, because her son. And so this motherfucker knew that I was a mom.
He didn't care.
He did not care. And had asked so many people if I was going to be there. So I was targeted. And
it doesn't make sense to me how the supervisor didn't get charged with something at all.
Nothing.
He saw what state you were in.
Well, and Mars, after that incident, I can't remember if I ever saw Mars again. I'm sure I did.
And that's the guy that
found me.
Okay.
He was an angel. Nobody can convince me otherwise. Mm-hmm. But there was some divine power with him. But the other roommate, he worked on second shift. So before I went back in August, keep in mind, this guy was still working at the company. They had the audacity to tell me, you know, Tressa, he's been working here for, you know, over a decade now, and you just started working here. And basically what he's doing is more important than what you're doing, and he has seniority. You can't work on this shift anymore. You have to go. I was punished. You have to go work this second shift. I have a son. Like, it just sucked. But
it's horrible.
But there was also destiny in that. So I go back to work, and maybe this is an important part of the story too about my relationship with my child's, we call him the bio donor, my son's biological father, is my grandma, my mother's mother, and I were very, very close. I grew up, my sister Denise and I grew up going to her house in New Mexico all the time, every summer. And I had a sister with Down syndrome, so our dynamic was a little bit different. Like, we didn't go on extravagant vacations and stuff like that. You know, we had a special needs sister, so getting to go to my grandparents' house and, you know, be able to go out to dinner and breakfast every day and get to go do fun things was a treat to us. And then we, you know, started middle school, and going to grandma and grandpa's house is no longer cool. And but in turn, they started coming to our house all summer. So my grandma was really sick in April, but she ended up coming down to Texas for like a month or two during the summer. And I remember coming home and crying to her because, remember, I go back with Taylor's dad, and one night I come home and I'm crying, not just because of the sexual assault, but he cheated on me again. And as I'm going through this horrible thing, you know, I find out he cheated on me again. And my grandma always slept in my bed with me. And I said something totally insane to my grandma. I crawled into bed with her, and I'm laying there crying. My grandma was such a, you know, like, just to give everybody a visual, my grandma was like 4'9". She looked like a little munchkin. Italian lady with black salt and pepper hair. She was the sweetest person, never said bad things about anybody. Always told you needed to eat, no matter if you just ate like 5 plates. Like, always thought that her grandchildren were hungry. Always cooking, you know, just the kind of grandma that is perfect. I was fortunate enough to have the perfect grandma. But that night I crawled into bed with her, and I was crying, and she was such a light sleeper. And I was lucky that she always felt comfortable in my bed, and we got, you know, even as an adult, she would sleep with me in my room. And I was crying, and I said something so morbid to her, and I remember verbatim. And I said, "Grandma, when you go to heaven, I need you to send me my soulmate." And I said, I cannot do this anymore with him. And keep in mind, my grandma never said, like, my sister Denise and I would get my grandma to say, like, we just thought it was funny to hear her cuss. We do the same thing with my mom.
Right.
Like, all of our kids now think it's funny to try, you know, we are definitely not allowed to use the F-bomb around mom. But, you know, we would get my grandma to cuss and stuff like that because, you know, grandma was so nice and sweet and gentle. But I said, I really need you to send me my soulmate. When you go to heaven, I need you to send me my soulmate. And I'm saying this through tears. And she was like, absolutely. I promise you, I will send you your soulmate. And I was like, I just can't do this anymore with him. And my grandma's like, I don't understand why you keep on putting, if someone shows you that they're an asshole, believe them that they're the asshole. My grandma's saying this, never heard her cuss. You know, she would say, damn it, and stuff like that, but never, usually it was at my grandpa. But, you know, she never cussed. So to hear her say, and I remember her just saying that made me be like, oh, grandma. And I like, through my tears, I was laughing because I had to tell my sister the next day, like, listen to what grandma said. Anyway, so maybe this was in May, June. By August, the beginning of August, my grandma passes away. And we lay her to rest. And maybe a couple of days, maybe 3 4 days after I get back, I go back to work. I've been my FMLA has ended, and I'm going back to work. And remember, they put me on the second shift. I'm not allowed to go back to my shift where I knew everybody. Plus, I didn't want to. I was getting death threats over work email from his friends that if I go back to that shift, they were gonna hurt me and all of that. And I would send it to HR, and nothing would happen.
That is horrible.
Yeah, yeah. Don't worry, I get my revenge. I work over the weekends to get my revenge on them. Anyway, so I go back to work, and again, like the divine powers take over. My grandma just passed away. And before work starts, and I'm in college at this time too. I think I was off for the summer, but the reason why I worked at this company is it was kind of my college job. Mm-hmm. And to take you in, and I'll explain the things that were taken away from me, but I was going to college at the time and working here. I didn't want to do this for the rest of my life. I had dreams and visions. But that day that I started work, we all stand around and we have this big group huddle before, our shift starts. And through the crowd, I see this guy that I'd never seen before in my life. And maybe I was delusional, maybe I was dissociated at the time, but it was just this, it wasn't love at first sight. Maybe it was, I don't know, but it was just this sudden feeling for me, like, I need to know him. Like, we're supposed to, there's something in this life that we're connected on. And I don't know what it is.
But we need to cross paths.
But we need to cross paths. And it was just this very powerful feeling. The world stopped, and it was just me kind of tunnel visioned on him. Again, don't know if I was delusional or disassociated at the time, but I like to believe it was my grandma blessing me with my soulmate. And not at the time did I put those two together. But so this was in August. I end up talking to him, and his name is Jeff. And we become really good friends. I'm still with my child's father at this time. But Jeff and I become really good friends. Become super close. After he worked second shift too, so we would sit up and talk all night until the early morning about anything and everything. He was the first person that I really felt like I had been in the silence of my own story. And Jeff knew nothing. He didn't even know that happened, but we talked about it. I had explained to him what had happened, and he genuinely was interested, and we would talk, but it wasn't even about that. And he would share his, he comes from a very broken family, and his mom is just a basket case. It just comes from a very broken family. But we related on, I don't come from that kind of family, but I could understand the brokenness, right? But we laughed, and it just felt like it was so powerful. Anyway, so this happens for a few months. We just talk, and Casey knows Jeff. I introduced Casey and Jeff, and we even go to the movies together. We have lunch together. All of it, like all of us. And Casey thought Jeff was cool. Like, I just thought Jeff was a friend. Well, then one night after work, Casey and I never lived together, not once in our relationship. I had an apartment by this time. I moved out of my mom and dad's house. They had to move to Tennessee because my dad got a promotion at this company, and they moved to Tennessee, and I have to stay behind because I'm going through all these legal matters. The DNA results still hadn't come back yet. So, and I was kind of batshit crazy not to spend like things were perfect or anything like that. I was going through it. Anyway, so Jeff and I become really good friends. We all were going to go bowling that night, and Casey was supposed to come. And keep in mind, going to a work event, it wasn't a work event, it was just friends getting together. That too was a little scary for me.
Absolutely.
Like I always was looking for the safe person to
make sure they don't leave you.
Right.
Yeah.
So Casey can't go, but Jeff was going. And I said to Jeff, you know, hey, look, I'm kind of weird about going out with a whole bunch of people that I'm cool with, but that I don't 100% know. And he's like, it's okay. Like, I got you. Like, anywhere you go, I'll go. I was like, all right, cool. So we go bowling. And I didn't want the night to end. Like, we just talked and laughed the entire night. And we had a friend in common. I went to high school with her. Her name's Tootie. She's my assistant now today, many years later. But Tootie, I was like, you know, you have to come over to my apartment and look at the yearbook picture of Tootie. It's so funny. I actually did her hair because Tootie wanted to look like Drew Barrymore with the curly, you know, short curly hair. She wanted to look like Drew Barrymore for her senior picture. And that poor girl, I did her hair for her. She looked like an emu.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And I was like, you have to come over and look at this picture. You're going to die. And so he came over and we ended up talking all night again. And, you know, at my apartment, and we laughed at the picture, and, you know, we laughed during the night. And then he tells me, hey, you know, it was getting to be daylight outside. It was almost 6 o'clock in the morning. And he's like, I got to go. You know, I have to get sleep because we had to go to work later that night. And I ruined the friendship. I kissed him. Like, I walked him to the door. I kissed him. And I was still with my boyfriend at the time. And I backed up and I was like, oh my God. And he's like, what? And I said, I'm still with Casey. And I remember he said, would it make you feel better if I kissed you back so you weren't the one that kissed me? And I was like, okay, both of us are like feeling this, like, because I never brought it up to him, like, hey, I'm attracted to you. I feel this way. I never really thought about it. I just thought he was an amazing person. And I was like, no. He ended up leaving. I had always felt super connected to him to the point where Casey started feeling it. And Casey like set a boundary of like, you can't talk to Jeff anymore. And I was like, well, I guess I have to quit my job then. So I quit working at this company and I went to go work at a law firm because that's my long-term goal was to go into law school. So I went to go work at this law firm. And I tell Jeff, listen, I can't talk to you anymore. I have to make this work with my child's dad. And I told him before we, you know, went off into our own worlds, like, I can't do this because I feel like I'm falling in love with you. And he said the same. Like, he's like, I'm not falling in love with you. I am in love with you. And it was just that like cinematic, like, FML, you know, but you have to go back to the toxic, shitty relationship. Well, during this time, so now it's been about 6 months. I'm trying to remember if this is before or after. I think it was after when I left for the law firm. I get a call from the police station. Yeah, it was definitely after because I was no longer working there. I get a call from the police station. The DNA results have come back, and there was no chance in hell. I mean, it was like 1 out of, 8 billion people. There wasn't enough people in the world to, for there to be that ratio. But during this time, I had connected really well with my sex crime investigator. She was amazing, very helpful. And I would tell her what was going on, what had happened at work, how they made me, change shifts, how I was getting death threats on work email, would turn it over to HR, and nobody would do anything, just all of these things. And she hit them right where it hurt. And so the DNA results come back. This is 6 months after. They're going to make the arrest. Instead of going to his home, they go to the company's cafeteria. They have this big cafeteria, and they arrest him in front of everybody. Good. And they say, you're arrested for the sexual assault and attempted murder of Tressa Cooper in front of everybody. Good. And they haul his ass out to jail. And then that's, my mom and dad are gone at this time. My sister I live in Austin now. My sister lives maybe an hour away. I don't feel support from my child's dad whatsoever. I really haven't connected. Anthony was really the only friend that Anthony and Tootie were really the only friends that I spoke to openly about what I was feeling. And I'm sorry, Carrie too. So there's 3 friends that I really could openly talk about, this is how I'm feeling. This is what I'm going through, all of that. But I really wanted my mom. My mom's all the way in Tennessee. And I call my mom and I say that, he's been arrested, and she was so happy and excited and all of that. But when you're going through the pursuit of justice, it having to tell your story over and over and over and over again, it almost is defeating. Like it's not paralyzing. You're just exhausted from telling this story 8,000 times. And, every move that you remembered that he did, and I remember telling my friend Carrie about it, and she's like, part of me is like feeling like these guys are getting off on the freaking story. Yeah. How much they ask you about it. I'm like, yeah, it's so weird. But I really wanted my mom. That's who I wanted, And during this time, now, 6 months had lapsed. He's in jail. I'm in college at the time.
And the company kept supervisor working.
We'll get into that here in a minute. Company kept supervisor working, guys in jail, and I make the decision. My sister she ended up getting married, and she was married to a military guy, and they get stationed in Colorado. So my sister's in Colorado. This is all within that year. My mom's in Tennessee. I only have, 3 friends that I can really process and talk this with, but I'm also feeling the shame, the embarrassment, the feeling of the burden, feeling like I'm being too much. So I really didn't feel like I would share with them, but I felt like if I talk about it too much, I'm going overboard, and I want to spare them not to feel like the heavy. So of course I became like the joker of the friend group and would joke around a lot. And it was me masking my pain and shame in what had happened. And I by this time I was working at the law firm, and maybe it was like a year after the fact, because I remember it was warm again outside. So let's say, April 1 year later, I knew like I had to talk to Jeff. And I didn't call him, but I knew what time he got off for lunch. So I drove up to work, and he had cut his hair, he had grown out his hair, because before he had kind of a flat top, the 90s style kind of flat top boy cut. And I had pulled up to the building, and I saw him walking across the parking lot, and immediately got butterflies, like, oh my God. And I remember yelling out like, hey, Jeff. And he comes over to my car, and he's like, hi, what are you doing here? And I lied and said I was picking someone up for lunch. I wasn't. I came there to see him. And I said, oh, picking up someone. And he said, I said, oh, you grew out your hair? And he's like, yeah, I did. He's like, And he said, how are you? And I said, well, he got arrested. And he's like, I heard. He's like, I wanted to call you because it was big news here. You know, it made all of the employees, and I wanted to call you, but I know that you wanted to stop contact with me. And I was like, I wish that you did call me. Why don't you call me tonight? Anyway, he kind of set up that boundary that night that as long as I was with Casey, that this wasn't going to work. You know, we couldn't even be friends. So I respected his boundaries, but in my gut, I was like, I have to make the relationship with Taylor's dad work. You know, my parents were together. Even though my parents were in a loving relationship and my dad respected my mom, I had to make this work. Anyway, so my sister's in Colorado at this time. She gets pregnant with my niece Cameron, and she was having complications during her pregnancy. And she had my other niece, Sydney, at the time, who was maybe 3-4 years old. And my sister my sister was up there by herself with her husband, and she didn't have any friends or family down there. So she asked me to come up while she was in Colorado to help her with Sydney. So I took some time off of work. And by this time I was working at the law firm, took some time off of work. And maybe the second day that I was there, Casey drove and dropped me off at the airport. And while I was there, I called back home. And all of this should have been, like, I was still very deep in my PTSD, and we'll talk a lot about that. But I called home maybe a day or two afterwards just to check in with Casey and see how he was. And another girl answered the phone and basically broke up with me for Casey because they were together now. And most women would be like, you know, total betrayal, all of that. But to me, it was finally permission to move on, that I don't have to make this work. And immediately I called Jeff that night, and we have been together ever since.
Wow.
So 23, 24 years now.
Crazy.
So yeah, we've been together ever since. He is still, like, to know Jeff is to love Jeff. Anybody that meets Jeff loves Jeff. He's so funny, but he has such a wonderful heart, and people just feel very welcome by him. So I'm very lucky to have him.
Good.
But Jeff also had to learn about my trauma too. And unfortunately, we ended up being together, but I had made the decision before going to Colorado that I was moving to Michigan to complete college, focus 100% on going to college. And before all of this happened, so we kind of grew up in, you know, there was no podcasts, there were no blogs, there was, you know, we barely had the internet. So we're lucky and we're fortunate now to have these podcasts. That's why it's so important that you allow people to tell their story so people can learn and feel connected to others, you know. But back then we didn't have any of that. So you did feel still, you did feel alone, you did feel like you were the only one that had experienced those feelings, and you start questioning if you're insane because you have all of these loopy thoughts. Am I the only stupid woman that took a shot when my mom said never to take a shot from a stranger? Am I the only stupid one that would take a shot? Why was I wearing matching panties and a bra? I should have gone home instead of going to a party. Like, all the shame and guilt and
self-blame.
Very much so. Mm-hmm. Very, very much so.
And I think it probably too felt more common then to just move forward and brush things under the rug. Like, why keep beating a dead horse? There's nothing much else we can do. Is like, he's in jail now, you know.
Right.
It's like it wasn't.
Well, we hadn't gone to trial yet.
Okay.
So people are going to be amazed and shocked by this part of the story. So as a kid, again, we didn't have podcasts. We didn't have the true crime YouTube community. We didn't have anything like that. What we had was crime shows like Unsolved Mysteries. We had...
Was 2020 around yet?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I don't think 2020 was. But we had, what's that one with John Walsh? America's Most Wanted.
Okay.
We had America's Most Wanted. We had Unsolved Mysteries. And then the O.J. Simpson trial had started when I was in high school, and Court TV came about.
Yeah.
So it was not uncommon that my mom was a big crime show person. Mm-hmm. So my sister and I loved to spend time with our mom, and we would just like kind of have to get into like accept, you know, hey, this is our life too. So we would watch Unsolved Mysteries. And even to this day, whenever I hear the theme song, I'm like, God, that is so terrifying. The theme song to Unsolved Mysteries is such a terrifying song. But theme song. But I remember when the O.J. Simpson trial started. And imagine this for your viewers and listeners, that because I'm a lot older than probably a lot of your viewers and listeners, but imagine when we all watched the trial for Johnny Depp and Amber Heard, Johnny Depp's attorney Vanessa, how powerful she was, and how every woman in America was just like, she is such a power play. That's how I felt with Marcia Clark when I was watching the O.J. Simpson trial. And I was like, I never realized what I wanted to do. And even though I had a son so young and went through, you know, in high school, I had teachers and students tell me that, you know, you're going to work at Walmart for the rest of your life, or you're going to depend on the system for the rest of your life. So I've always been that in the mentality, and my dad wouldn't have it any other way. In fact, when I told him I was pregnant, he picked up a chair and threw it and told me that I was still going to college. Like, there was no questions about it.
Yeah.
But when I saw Marcia Clark on Court TV, this was brand new, I was like, that's what I want to do. I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I knew that I wanted to be her one day. So I went to college. My undergrad was in, you know, criminology and sociology. I double majored, and my hope and dream was to go into law school. But then my whole thing started, and I was now in college. Jeff was here in not here. Jeff was in Texas. And I was all the way up in Michigan. I decided to go to college there. My dad quit his job, and my mom and dad moved to Michigan because they knew that I was going to need help with my son, to help me with Taylor, and so that we could also, you know, my son and I could also bond after this awful crime. And I get a call. This is probably in the first semester of college when I go up to Michigan. Jeff and I are still talking and all of that. But I get a call from the district attorney, and they said, we have good news for you. And I was like, okay. And they said he's going to accept a plea deal. They never once told me what the plea deal was until he accepted it. So it wasn't like I couldn't tell them yes or no. He just called me to tell me what the plea deal was. And he said, keep in mind, everybody, you're going to drop your jaw. He drugged me, abducted me, raped me for hours. I haven't had my colostomy bag put on yet. I had been already told by the doctors that I need one. I was 23 years old at this time. And I was trying to believe it wasn't true, that and things, you know, obviously were happening with my body, that I'm like, okay, I'm going to need one, but not right now, not yet. So I would go in and have like these little surgeries and stuff like that.
And you had to have all those surgeries because of the rape?
Yeah. So stitches and stuff like that. And it was, you know, It wasn't fair because, yes, it was just day surgery that I would go in, but I would be down and out for a couple of days, after that.
The fact that you had to have surgery, the fact that it happened at all.
Right. Absolutely. So he calls me and he's like, well, I have good news for you. And I said, what's that? And I was 22 at this time. What's that? And he said, well, he wants to accept a plea deal. So he originally had told the police that he had not touched me. And then when the DNA results came back, it showed proof that he did. There was no other DNA on me except for his. They had taken not just the DNA from me, but they took the couch cushions, the samples of the carpet, the glass for fingerprints, all of that into evidence. In fact, the second roommate had seen me when I was working at the company, had seen me there and was like, I think he was trying to be funny, but it wasn't funny to me. And it also made me feel really bad. He's like, yeah, we had to buy a new couch after you. And this was the supervisor and the second roommate, not the one that found me, but the other one that worked the second shift. So he saw me on the second shift and made that comment. And I remember crying, and Jeff and I would take breaks and we would go sit outside. And I remember one night after that happened, telling him about it. And Jeff just has a good way of listening. But, sometimes I tell him, like, you can take a perfect moment and ruin it with a joke. Like, we were having a real sincere moment. Then you just had to tell a joke and make me laugh. But he had a good way of listening, but also kind of flipped my mood upside down. So I kind of let go of that really quick. But they had taken so much DNA evidence that when it came to trial, there was and his attorney said, listen, you're going to serve time for this. There's no getting around this whatsoever. So he took a plea deal, and I want people to understand that the most horrendous crime happened to me. Not just the sex, not just the rape, the sex crime, but the strangulation, the abduction, the drugging. All of that happened to me. But this man got probation. He got 15 years probation. And then they said the good thing is everybody needs to remember these words. He is going to be on the lifetime sex offender list for the rest of his life. For the rest of his life, once a year, he's going to have to go into the police department, wherever he lives, take a picture, fill out a card of where he lives, and he'll have to remember why he's there for the rest of his life. And then for the remainder of the year, he's going to have to worry about when the cops come and do a verification compliance check that he put down the right address. So for the rest of the year, he's going to have to worry about his door being knocked on when he has friends and family over that might not know of his crime. Or they might go next door and knock on, if he's not home, knock on the neighbor's door and ask if he lives there. And he it was almost like a salesy pitch of, hey, you're getting a good deal here. And
so 15-year probation means he wouldn't go to jail.
Right. So, but remember, my mom is the feisty Italian lady who was with me when the attorney called, and she's like, well, what if we don't want to accept that? And they said, well, we've already accepted it for her. And then the district attorney said, and keep this in mind because it's going to come back, we're giving him enough rope to hang himself because he's not going to be law abiding for 15 years. There's just no way. So I also harbored the guilt of my story not being good enough for this man to go to prison, feeling the terror of, oh my God, my story wasn't good enough to put him in prison, but now he's going to have another victim. And what if she doesn't make it?
Did you have any fear of him trying to hurt you?
That's coming.
Okay.
So I still continue on with school, and I decide that I'm going to stay in Michigan. And Jeff and I are trying to figure that out too. Of, if he, and we were really good. This was pre 9/11, so flights were really cheap. We would see each other once every 3 weeks, and our long distance relationship wasn't bad. Plus, I feel like I think I have this analogy that our relationship is still so good because we didn't have that. We had no other choice but to get to know each other over the phone and learn how to communicate with each other. So we had that early on where our communication was, either we communicate or we don't. And we made a choice to, always communicate with each other. But he got probation. I decided to stay in Michigan with my parents and finish school. We were trying to figure out, okay, are you going to move here? Am I going to finish school? Like, I don't know where I'm going to go to law school yet. All of the things. And then it hit. My sister, who had Down syndrome, it all hit like one after another. My sister, about a couple days before 9/11, my sister with Down syndrome got walking pneumonia. We didn't know because she was nonverbal, but we could tell like she was sick. We just thought it was a winter cold. We were up in Michigan. But one night I went back to my apartment and my mom and dad were at home, and my sister or my mother called me and said, "Hey, I need you to come home and help me with Kimmy because something's wrong. I just went in to make sure that she had water. She's been really sick with a cold, but her lips look really purple. Do you mind coming home and helping me take her to the hospital?" And my dad had been on a flight. He flew the day of. So he had a flight he was pilot. So he had a flight the next day. So my mom was like, "I don't feel comfortable waking up your dad. He needs to sleep." It's like, "Of course, Mom." So I go back to the house, and I remember walking in and helping my mom put my sister's shoes. And my sister Kimmy was older than me, but by heart she was so much younger. But helping my mom put her shoes on and putting her coat on. And we walked her out to the car, and I looked over to my mom and I said, "Did you get her insurance card? Did you get the medicine that she's been on? The doctors at the ER are going to ask that." And again, this divine thing happened in my life where my mom had already buried a child. My brother had leukemia and passed away from leukemia. So she had already buried a child. I had already gone through my situation. And then now, my mom runs in, and it just so happened that when my mom was in the house, my sister was sitting right behind me in the car, and I was going to drive. So I was in the driver's seat. My sister was right behind me, buckled in, and I heard her make a big gasp and literally kind of collapse, going forward. And it felt like I sat there for minutes, like trying to contemplate, like, is my sister okay? And it probably was a matter of seconds, but I started, trying to, kind of turned around in my chair and like try to wake her up. And I could tell like she wasn't breathing. By this time, my mom came outside, and I flung open the door, and I told my mom, "Call 911. And she was like, "What's wrong?" And I was like, "Kimmy's not breathing." And my mom stands in the middle of the yard screaming, and I'm trying to do CPR on my sister. And I can't maneuver her because she was larger, she was a larger girl. I couldn't maneuver her to get her flat on the seat. And I was like, and my mom was in pure panic and shock that she wasn't going to get in the damn phone. So I was like, okay, I got to run in as fast as I can and get the phone and then get my dad to, come out and help me. So I run in, I grab the phone, I call 911. I'm on the phone with 911, saying, "Please get to this address. My sister's not breathing." And I fling open the door. My poor dad was naked, sleeping nude. He didn't know I was coming over to the house. I fling open the door, and all of us, my friends and my sister and I, call him Lorenzo, my dad. Lorenzo's like, he asked me later on, he's like, oh, we didn't see anything. I was like, Dad, I was so out of it. I didn't see
At that moment, nothing mattered.
And like, you don't have nothing to be embarrassed about. We're good. We're good. And so I tell my dad, and my dad goes into, again, he's high-ranking military guy and just knows what to do in traumatic events. And he runs out of the house, and he and I start doing CPR. As I'm on the phone with 911, he and I, and that is the most like, I'd gone through CPR classes, but I didn't ever have to do it in real life. It is the most exhausting thing because your adrenaline's so high and you're just like, breathe, especially when it's your sister. And I hand the phone to my mom and I say, you need to do 911. And my mom's, screaming and hailing. And my dad and I got her to breathe. And then it was a matter of minutes before the paramedics got there. But, when you're in that, it feels forever. And so they pull up and, take her off and stuff like that. And she ended up, she didn't make it. And so now I was dealing with PTSD from everything, the shame and embarrassment that I didn't get the justice that I deserved and felt re-traumatized by the system. My sister just passed away, and like anybody that has lost a sibling can resonate with this. Seeing your parents mourn a sibling and knowing there's nothing you can do, like your personality, you being there, all of that can't take away their pain. That is a very heavy, hard thing to sit with because my parents are such beautiful people, and to see them hurt the way that they did, that's all I wanted, was just to take their pain and hold it for them because it was so tough for them. And my mom also kind of lost her identity too, because she was a nurse, but then she quit her job and she's a caretaker. So she kind of lost her identity in that. But we all made the decision to move back to Texas. I was getting out of school anyway. And I'll never forget calling Jeff and saying, hey, this is what we're actually going to do now. And him being so excited. And this is probably maybe 6-8 months after the guy's on probation. So we moved back to Texas, and I'm out of school now. I went to school for sociology and criminology, and I take a job working for a children's shelter that works with Child Protective Services out of Texas. And probably 2 or 3 months into that job, I decide to they were teen kids. Me and this guy named Oscar, we decide to take them to a pizza place for dinner, just to get out of the shelter and like enjoy, and also for them to connect with each other and all of that. Just to have some respite from their own trauma that, being with your mom and dad that are utterly abusive, that's all they know. And they're away from their friends. They're away from, everything that they know, just to give them some respite of not having to think about that and connect with each other and enjoy some pizza. So I'm having pizza at the pizza place, and lo and behold, who walks in? He does. He knew I was there. He comes in, and I'm sitting at a table in a booth with, these children and my coworker. I think there was, 4 kids and me and him. He comes in, and there's a booth right across from us. And he doesn't order any food, no drink, nothing. He goes and sits down at the booth and looks at me and stares at me, would not take his eyes off of me. And I told the kids, I said, we had gotten the pizza, and I said, we're going to take this to go. And Oscar's like, what the hell, Tressa? What do you mean we're taking this pizza to go? And I said, listen, we got to go now. And he thought it was one of the kids' parents that had walked in. And when we got out to the van, he was like, what happened? Was that so-and-so's dad? And I said, no, did you see him? And he said, yes, I saw him. And I said, no. And I had to come out and tell him, hey, that's my rapist. And he's probation. He's not supposed to be around me. I have a protective order against him. And we end up leaving. I just wanted to forget about it. By this time, when I moved back to Texas, it's just Jeff and I and Taylor all living together. My mom and dad, lived maybe 30, 45 minutes away. And I don't know how, I'm trying to space out like how, so there was that incident. And then maybe a week later, I had to go to a visit for work. And it was out near the Austin airport. And now it has like a whole bunch of highways and stuff like that near it. But back in the day, it was just like kind of a county road that would go in and out of the airport. It was kind of a 2-lane, highway. But there was a convenience store right across the street from the airport. And I had to go out they call it Del Valley. I had to go out to Del Valley, and to get back into Austin, you kind of had to go through the airport. And I remember I had to go to the bathroom, but I also had to get gas really bad. And I probably wanted cigarettes or something like that. So I pull into this convenience store, and all of a sudden there's a car that pulls in right after me. And I didn't think anything of it, whatever, people are coming in and out of that convenience store. But this car pulls in right behind me, and he gets out of the car and he walks in front of his car. So my tail end's here, his front end's here. He gets out of his car, walks in the front, and he's intimidating me. He's doing it on purpose, just staring at me. Gets out of his car.
This is the rapist again.
This is the rapist. Okay. Stands, here's the back end of my car. Here's his front end. I look in the rear view mirror. I see him, and there's a car that's right in front of me, so I can't just drive off. I'm kind of packed in. And I remember looking over. I don't know how I had this. I must have gone to a wedding, but back then it was the early 2000s. Everybody had the cardboard disposable cameras. I had one of those. And I started taking pictures of him to show to the police that he's been following me. And I knew I had Oscar's testimony, but now I was by myself. So I started taking pictures, and a guy had gotten out of his car, and I screamed at him, and I told him that was my rapist. He's behind me. He's following me. And the guy, I remember he was a big old guy. As soon as I said he's my rapist, men don't like to hear that at all. And he went into protection mode, and basically, I think he was the car in front of me, moved his car up and like helped me, helped me get out. And then he basically, when I drove away, him and that guy were talking, and you could tell the guy was mad just by his physical language. You could tell he was not happy with my rapist. So that night I call my mom and I tell her what has been going on. And she's like, you need to go and get those pictures developed as soon as possible. We're going to go tomorrow and we're going to make a report to show that he's been stalking you and violating your protective order. Keep in mind, protective order. I'm like, all right, cool. That night, he ended up this is what got him thrown into prison for over a decade. Ultimately, it was because he violated the probation against me, but he had gone out drinking. He was on a motorcycle that night after seeing me. So the universe, destiny, kind of helped myself out again. He went out drinking. He was on a motorcycle, and he got charged with a DWI. And the DA was like, yep, we gave you enough rope. You hung yourself. We're revoking all of your probation, and there's no suspension on your sentence. You have to serve that entire time in prison. And so we go through the process, all of that. I go to court, and they're allowing me, because the first time I didn't do a victim witness statement. I was in Michigan at the time, but he did a plea bargain. I just never got to do a victim witness statement. So they asked me to do a victim witness statement when we went back to court for his sentencing. And so I did a victim witness statement. They had the pictures, all of that stuff when he was following me. So they knew that he was also stalking aside from just the DWI. And my two best friends and I were talking last night, and I had to call Carrie because Carrie had been there since day one, like after the sexual assault up until this point of, going back to court because he hung himself with a DWI. That's what landed him in prison. Yeah. It wasn't my rape and strangulation, it was a DWI. That's what, unfortunately, that's the reality that sex crime victims have to face, is just no harsh punishments for offenders. But he said in open court that he said, because I was a lot thinner when he met me, and like part of my trauma was trying to make myself less appealing. Jeff loved me despite anything, but make myself less appealing. So I gained weight. And he told open court, they showed him a picture of me, and he's in front of all of the courtroom. He's like, well, she's gotten really fat. And all of the women, that was just so harsh that this man, and I didn't give a shit. I was like, good, you don't find me attractive anymore? Bingo, I'm winning. So every woman was offended. Me, none whatsoever. I don't want to be attractive to you. Anyway, so I did my victim witness statement, and he ends up going to prison. I think he ended up, he got 15 years of probation. I think he served the full time without a suspended, a lot of times people will only serve 50% or 80%. He had to serve the full amount. And I think he served maybe 13, 14 years in prison. And the other thing I want people to understand that I have never resonated with the word survivor. I just haven't. Because to me, surviving is restoration, right? It's restoring who you were. When you are a sex crime victim, you have the life before and the life after, and you see things through a different lens, where the things that you loved and enjoyed at one time in life now become familiar but foreign to you at the same time. And I was never the same person that I was before that. So there was yes, my body is still here, but I had to crawl and peel through every layer that I could to restore myself into the person who I am today. Didn't go to law school, didn't complete law school. That was taken from me. But my safety and my security was taken from me, being in fear all the time for not only myself, but my nieces and my daughter. And I have a daughter with Jeff, Sarah, who's 22 now, around my age when all of this happened, being in fear for her. There's so much wrapped up in sexual violent crimes that it's not just the shame. It's not just the guilt. It's the betrayal of your own body. It's the feeling of trying to find your own self and having to grieve the loss of yourself every single day, and having to wake up every single day and remembering that this happened to you, and making the best foot, taking the best foot forward. I went through several years of therapy, but I would always get to a certain part, and of course I'm healed, and I'm much further away from this now that I can talk fully about the crime. But I would get to a certain part of my of the crime right before he would urinate on me. That was the thing that I would stop therapy because I didn't want to go any further. That was the destructive piece that I just couldn't say out loud. Oh, and then, he wasn't done. He thought he killed me, but he wanted to make sure by urinating on me, I couldn't say that out loud. And I would just stop therapy altogether. And it would just bring me back into the pattern of my PTSD. It ruined friendships. It ruined many relationships.
Well, you change, you know, and nobody else around you does. I mean, maybe, the people that were directly affected, like your family and stuff, but the other people around you, the acquaintances, the friends. I always say, people can feel for you.
Right.
But it really, truly is impossible to know unless you went through it. And even what you're talking about of the life before, the life after, people just see the act and what happened, but they don't know internally what you're battling and dealing with every single day from it.
I get that. But as women, I don't think there's any woman in this world that hasn't been affected, either their friends, their family, acquaintances. You don't know someone that hasn't been affected by this type of crime, right? Like all of us women know, hey, I have a friend that was sexually harassed at work or, manhandled or raped. So I always felt like a woman should be my biggest advocate. And I quickly learned that the only person that can be my best advocate and speak up for myself was myself.
Absolutely.
So, and that took years and years and years to get to. So going through therapy, I had awful, Jeff and I called them PTSD dreams of just, but also the physical piece too, because trauma, yes, it
stores in the body.
It does. And so I have this weird tic where I'll just cough. I quit swimming because of the fear of when I hold my breath, it automatically triggers me because I held my breath for so long when all of that was happening. Right when I think it was 25, I went to the doctor and I was having issues and there was no way of doing another, surgery. So that's when we made the decision to do the colostomy bag, which ultimately, since I was 21, they said that would have to happen. I felt even like a burden then. Like, is Jeff even going to find me attractive? Jeff has never once, intimacy was never ruined, nothing. He has never once said anything about it. He's been very, very supportive and would always tell me how proud I am and always tells me you're so beautiful, all of that. But he's never made me feel, he's never been weirded out by it or anything like that. He's just like, I'll take what I can get. I don't care.
Yeah, it's not reversible, right? It's for life.
Yeah, it's for life. But when lots of changed. I not just had my son, who's now, by the way, today he's 30 years old. He's an incredibly smart man. He's the funniest person I know. I always say you got your sense of humor from me. Him and Jeff are very close, and they always think Jeff is his biological dad, but that's fine. But I'm like, you got your sense of humor from me 100%. He's so funny and he's incredibly smart. I think he's getting his PhD in history. He wants to be a history teacher. He's just, both he and I beat the odds, because usually, when you're a teen mom, you don't go on to college and your kid doesn't go off to college and all of this. And I always am very proud of us for beating the odds there. But now, Jeff and I together, we always look at, sometimes I forget that Taylor is not his. And Taylor's dad as soon as we broke up, he never really developed a relationship with Taylor. And Taylor's now at the age where he's just like, yeah, that guy's a meathead. You always, why'd you date such a meathead, Mom? But I have a daughter now. And it was really important for me to speak out for her too. But so many years of raising her and stuff like that. So when he got out of prison, I think Sarah was maybe, she's 22 now, so maybe 12, 13 years old. I kept on going back to, okay, the DA said that he'll be on the lifetime offender database, and that for the rest of his life, he'll have to go in and take a picture and fill out a form. And then for the remainder of the year, he's going to have to worry about them coming and doing verification and compliance on him. So that was my sliver of justice, and feeling like I always knew where he was. He was in South Austin. I just never went to South Austin. I stayed all the way north. I always knew exactly what he looked like because they would take pictures of him, all of that. So I was fine. Then and my PTSD life continued on. And then in 2020, it was April. Every April's my birthday. It shouldn't be a bad month for me, but April, the shutdown happened. March, April, I forgot. I think I was sick or something like that, and I knew I didn't have COVID, but I was sick in a different. I don't know. I forgot what it was, but I had gone to the hospital, and by this time, all the doctors and nurses, like the entire hospital, ER is taped off. You have to go through, just a very protective area. All of the nurses and doctors are wearing their protective gear, the mask, all the shield, the mask, the big robe with gloves and all of this. And when I saw them like that, I was so sick. I kind of just didn't listen to what my mind and my body was saying. And they shuffled me into like kind of a red zone because they didn't know if I had COVID or not. And they were talking to me through a phone, and it was a lot.
Yeah.
It was too much. But them being in the PPE gear, it reignited my PTSD because it took me back to the same nurse. And that's exactly how they were dressed. And so I'm going through another big, huge trigger that I hadn't really had that many triggers in years. Mm-hmm. And now we're also isolated. And I was working at the time. And I think because of the shutdown, I think that they laid off a whole bunch of people because I was laid off. I wasn't working. I wasn't, I just had home life to deal with. So I isolated and experiencing anxiety and depression, and had not been on medicine for years and years and years. Fought through that and then worked through that. My mom and dad lived right next door. By the way, I don't live there anymore, just in case he is listening. I've moved like 3 times since this because of him. And there's some things too that I want to go back on that might answer some of the questions for the listener, but I kind of worked through that. And then I think it was 2021, there was a huge lawsuit in Austin, Texas against the DA, the city of Austin, and the Austin Police Department for mishandling sex crime victim cases, whether their rape kits were not processed correctly, or whether they didn't get a thorough investigation. A lot of victims sued for violating their constitutional crime victim rights. And one of the ladies' stories, and I don't know if she was part of the lawsuit. I think she was, because I think it was in the lawsuit that I had read. But this man had broken into her home and had raped her in ways that I had been raped, and strangled her. And after strangulation, he urinated on her. And what we know in sex offenders is, one, it's not a singular thing. Usually it happens repeatedly. With my particular case, there were 2 people before me. And unfortunately, that happened in the late 80s, early 90s when DNA was not a thing. So while the women reported that, and we know that most people don't report, right? So there could be, like, for instance, with Austin, Texas, there could be 10,000 rapes that happen, but only, 1%, or I think it's 1 or 10%. I can't, only like, 1,000 people get through the system. And then 1,000 people report, then you question why so many don't have harsh punishment or, get any kind of justice. Only 1% of that. So you might have 1 or 2 cases each year that are from those 1,000 cases that have been reported. So anyway, I found out that he had done this, and this was prior to his trial. I had found out that he had done it twice before. It was reported. One of the ladies he had also urinated on and strangled. I don't know about the first lady. I know the second lady he strangled and urinated on. And anyway, he urinated on and had strangled and urinated on, and they let him go. And then I feel like he had done this a lot before me too. I was just fortunate enough to have a really good mom and dad that, and not to say the other victims didn't have great support system or moms and dads. My mom and dad did not put up with the police shit. They were just, no, like, you're going to take care of our daughter. And despite it all, he only got probation, but they fought for a thorough investigation. And, if they had to pay out of pocket for whatever, they would pay out of pocket. Anyway, seeing that in the new lawsuit that this woman had been strangled and urinated on, and that her rape kit in Austin, Texas was mishandled and she never got justice, I was like, what the fuck? This is him. This is 100% him. So they call it the SOAR unit. And unfortunately, I wish that we all had, Meredith's, Olivia's in real life, because if we did, our world would be, from SVU, our world would be a lot better. But the world doesn't really work like that. They have a SOAR unit called the Sex Offender Apprehension Registry. And every single police department agency across the nation has these. And I also want to make it clear to victims and victims' families and those who had victims that did not survive this, either from them taking their own life or from the crime itself, that you as a direct family member have access and rights to this information. I called the SOAR unit and I asked, this was in 2022. This is when it all started. I said, can you tell me when the last time you verified his address was? Because I knew he was doing something. And they told me, oh, it's on the registry. I said, and by this time I'm not so deep in I'm not so close to the crime. I'm 25, by this time I think it was 23 years into it. But I was just like, they said, it's on the registry. And I said, no, sir, that is when he reports. When did you verify the information? And I learned over I would call almost every week to see, when did you verify? Because they would put me off. We're going to have to look into that. We're going to have to look into that. Well, the reason why they were looking into it is because they didn't want to tell me that they had not verified his address in over 7 years. He was coming in yearly to give his address. And their thing is, well, he signs that that's true and accurate on the paper, that he's providing the true, accurate information. And I'm like, so wait a second, we're believing
believing a rapist?
Yeah, we're believing a rapist over, it was the what the fuck moment.
Yeah.
So I think in 2020, it was 2022 or 2023. I had been on their neck, just relentless, calling them, saying you need to go out and verify his address, telling them why. And then kind of as a victim, I was burdening them, with asking them to do their fucking job. And unfortunately, this isn't just an Austin, Texas thing. This is happening all over the nation for sex crime victims. And it just doesn't impact past victims. It impacts people that can be, a future victim. It impacts the residents of that community who believe in the sex offender registry, that that's true and accurate. It's happening all across, that these verification and compliance checks aren't really happening. In fact, if anybody wants to have a fun interview, look up Austin, Texas, Fox News, APD, SOAR unit, SOAR, and you can hear that. We'll get there, but you'll hear the head person over SOAR unit, when I finally went public about this and started fighting for reform. He has the audacity to just say, the news anchor said, well, how do you, when do you guys do verification and compliance? And he said, well, we just sniff it out, and if they're acting weird, then we'll go out and do a verification and compliance check. Dude, they're sex offenders. All of them should be weirdos to you. That is not normal for anybody to do that to a person. That every single one of them should get a bad sniff test. That's weird. Anyway, I think it was in 2022, 2023, I had called, early 2023, I had called in yet again. His name was Corporal Hector Campos. He was my point of contact at the SOAR unit. And he had sent me a lot of gaslighty emails. Like we have in Texas, we have this thing called Chapter 62. And I would just revert back to, you guys have to do verifications. And he said, we do verifications. The offender signs the document that's them verifying that there's truth and accuracy to what they wrote down. I'm like, okay, bro, you and I are on two different planets, because that's not verifying someone's information. But I called in and I asked him again, have you gone out and done a compliance check on him? I don't feel safe. By this time I had moved, I don't know, maybe 2-3 times by this point. And I said, I don't feel safe. This head of the SOAR unit had the audacity to say, Tressa, you should consider yourself lucky, because most victims don't get the justice that you've gotten. And he's basically telling me to buzz off, take what I can get. At least I got a little bit of justice. Now I need to leave them alone. And I will never forget what I said back to him, though. I told him, I said, I hope that you're not a betting man, because what happened to me was not luck. Someone that has to sit with a colostomy bag for the rest of their life and PTSD, that is so traumatizing. That's not luck. I hope that you're not a betting man. I think I called him an asshole and told him I can't, that what he just said was incredibly triggering, and hung up the phone on him. And that night I tried to commit suicide, and obviously I wasn't successful in that. But just from 2022 up until that time, it was just this is never going to end. I am going to be scared for the rest of my life. I'm going to feel betrayed now by our justice system, one that I wanted to be a part of, and go to law school and all of that. I feel total betrayal. All of the gaslighting from APD, it felt like I was back into the sex crime itself. Just the shame, the embarrassment, the burden, all of the feelings, the fear, the blame game, all of that came back 110%. Something that had, I really definitely worked on, during that time. But him saying that I was lucky, it almost, again, it went back to, this is my fault, because he's right. Like, there's so many women that don't get justice that I did. Like, how dare I ask them to go do this? This is never going to fucking end. I'm never going to get the justice that I deserve. The sliver of justice that I was hoping for, that at least he had to go in and he was going in once a year, but nobody was verifying any of his information. And that was one part of my justice. Like, at least if I have to be scared for the rest of my life, at least he has to live in fear too, when his door is knocked on. And that was taken from me in all one swoop. And I just didn't want to be here anymore. So after the suicide attempt, I went to the hospital, all of that. My mom and dad and my husband and my kids begged me to get into intensive therapy. I had been holding on to what was going on with the SOAR unit. Again, I didn't want to burden them, and I didn't want to put them in fear. So nobody really knew what was, I think that they, like, my sister knew a little bit about it. My mom and dad knew a little bit about it, but not enough to know that I was being so traumatized until it got so bad that I tried to kill myself. And then, I had to come clean with everything. And I went back into that silent mode. If I don't speak it, then I can not make it someone else's problem, not make other people feel like I'm being too heavy. So I quit my job. I was working for a very well-known company and had gone into intensive therapy. I was in intensive therapy, I think anywhere from 8 months to 12 months, where I was doing every single day, like group therapy, one-on-one therapy. I learned how to meditate. It just all of these beautiful gifts that were given to me. And that's why I'm here today. Like through that, it was kind of like a rising phoenix, where I just became incredibly strong. And I realized in that point, like, the only person that can speak out for myself is myself. And knowing that there's other women and children out there behind every single one of those offenders that are on the registry across not just Texas, but across the nation, that there's victims that sit behind offenders' faces, and knowing that they're getting more rights than the victims that sit behind their faces, I knew I had to fight. And just to circle back to, because I know that a lot of people are going to question why the supervisor never got in trouble. When we were going through, and I want to, before getting into the legislation changes that I'm making, the reason why he didn't get into trouble is they interviewed him and they said that he had left, that he had carried me out and stuff because I worked for him, which was true. And that he was worried about me, but that he left me with this other man because the other man said that I was drunk and that I could throw up and die. And he had to go back to the tavern because all of his employees were there. Well, the APD, Austin Police Department, found that story to be feasible, and he never got in trouble for it. I don't know where he is in life now. I know that he continued working for the company. And also to again, before getting into legislation and victim rights, I want to clear up two other things. One, the reason why I keep on saying the company is because I did a huge settlement with them in, I think, 2020 or 2002 or 2003. I was still in my early 20s. But again, my mom does not take shit from anyone. And she's like, no, they didn't do a background check before to show that he's been arrested for violent crimes in the past. They allowed him to continue working when he had a pending charge, and not just any charge, but a crime against one of their employees. They made you change your own shift. And just different things. And she's like, it was never about the money for us. I came from a very well-off family. For me, it's always changing the policies and making this world a better place.
So that it doesn't happen to anyone else.
It doesn't happen to anyone else. And I got that from my mom and my sister are the two people that really like shaded that color for me, that's what life is all about. But I ended up taking the company to court and we did a settlement. But part of my settlement wasn't just money. It was that they had to, for the first time ever, and luckily it wasn't just my case, but other companies, because this was a very well-known company, very, very successful, very well-known company. So once this got out into the working world, other companies started doing it too, but they didn't know behind the scenes who pushed them to do this. So there was two things that I made them do in the settlement. That sexual harassment training was mandatory for every employee within the company, and yearly training, or I think it was once a year you had to be retrained, or it was during orientation or whatever, but every person had to go through sexual harassment training. Because had I have known that, or other people had heard the girl that he kept on asking, is Tressa going to be there? Is Tressa going to be there? That was harassment. Maybe she would have gone and talked to someone and all of that. The emails that I was getting from from other employees there and sending them to human resources, life-threatening emails. If you come back to this company, we're going to kill you. Like, you're like, it's unfortunate that he didn't kill you the first time, stuff like that. And I would send it to HR and they wouldn't do anything, but that's a form of harassment. So, I made it mandatory that unfortunately, like with us, we had to give a time constraint. So I said for the next 30 years, every employee that comes in has to do sexual harassment training. Luckily now the feds make it happen, but this was before the feds picked it up. The other thing was that they had to, so he had been there 10 years prior. This was in 99. So I guess he was like, at this company, we had badges and we had employee numbers. Right. So you could tell like the tenure of someone based on their employee number. So there was 1, 2, 3, right? By this time it was like in, 6-digit numbers. He only had 3 numbers on his badge. So he had been there for a very, very long time. And again, 80s, 90s, this other crime happened. But I made it mandatory that they go back and I think I don't think it's because of me, but the feds picked this up that now every company has to do it. I think it's every 3 years that you have to do a criminal background check. So I made that mandatory. And then of course, there was damages to my claim too. But I just wanted to make sure that I cleared up those two things. The other thing is, you guys will hear me say the rapist. And the reason why that I don't say his name publicly is because I don't know where he is. I am still scared of him. And I will never publicly say his name until the day he dies, because he's already shown me what he's capable of. And we'll start shifting back into the story. During this time, I think it was, I went through my therapy in 2024. I found out that I no longer had a protective order. So once he served all of his time, and this goes for, and I'm going to tell new crime victims, or if you're ever put in this situation, which I pray to God it stops today, but it's not. As soon as he completed his entire sentence, so his, 13, his 15 years, that restraining order, protective order was lifted, even though he's on the lifetime offender database. And in Texas, I don't know about different states, but an offender is listed as high, medium, low. High is not, if they reoffend, it's when they reoffend. Moderate is highly likely, and low is, maybe that is a like very low risk that he to the community. But my protective order was taken away from me. This man's on the lifetime offender registry, listed high risk offender, and I found out there was no protection for me. And yes, many people are going to say, Tressa, that's just a piece of paper. And yes, you're right. It is just a piece of paper. Evil people will do evil things. A piece of paper isn't going to stop them. My thing is that if he ever came to my door, he found me, right? He came to my door. I see him on my security camera. I can't call the cops and say, hey, this man is on my property. I have a protective order against him. He's supposed to be within 1,000 feet. He's showing up on my property. This is the second or third time. All that they can do is give him a trespassing warning and hope he doesn't show back up. There's nothing I can do with law enforcement. Yes, I could probably, I'm in Texas, I could probably shoot him, but then I'd be going to prison because I'd be shooting through my door. So he didn't show any, potential risk. But if I had a protective order, there'd be no question. The police would take him in immediately. So I went to the court and I found out that I didn't have a protective order. I went to Travis County DA. We asked the court for them to issue a lifetime protective order. The judge said no. He doesn't impose any current threat. He's been, this happened 25 years ago, even though he served, 15. And, it is what it is kind of thing. So now I've been, I still get gaslit by the city and by the Austin Police Department. And it still really fucks me up, but this is bigger than me. And it's not about me anymore. It's about protecting women and children and understanding our rights when they're violated. And if our laws is only there to protect the offenders, then I'm going to change the laws to start protecting victims better.
Yeah, because a lot of victims, they might fight once or twice, and then when they're constantly shut down, they're going to give up. Mm-hmm. But if there's one person like you that keeps fighting for so many others, that's where the change is going to happen.
Right. And also, I think there was a recent case in Oklahoma where this young boy, I think he's 18 years old now, but he had attempted rape on 3 girlfriends or three girls he was dating, and then tried to strangle them. And he was able to plead down to a misdemeanor. He was facing 40 years and was able to plead down to a misdemeanor. And again, those cases aren't singular. Mm-hmm. Predators are going to be predators, and they're going to be evil for the rest of their, do evil shit for the rest of their life. So creating a space where there's harsher punishments for sex crime violence, that people can't plead down. Mm-hmm. There's a minimum. Yeah. You're going to prison for at least 3 years if you do a crime like this. 2 is a victim should never have to request a lifetime protective order against her or their sex offender, especially if they're on the offender registry. You should never have to request that or find out after the fact.
Yeah, that should be a given.
Yeah. So I've been fighting with that. And by the way, I'm working with the Office of the Governor for the state of Texas, a sex assault crime task force. And I'm also going to Congress, in DC to also compel these to the federal government too. But, the protective orders is really important to me. But the reform around the sex offender registry, that was created by a mother who lost her daughter who didn't know that this man that was around her child was a sex offender. And had she have known, would she have let her daughter walk into danger? No. So that sex offender, Megan's Law, was created for a little girl named Megan so that the community would know where these risk pools were, right? So if we're not verifying that, and I'm going to give people the statistics for Austin, if we are not verifying that the sex offender actually lives there, then you are not being honest on the registry. And, that public information that's out there is not true and accurate because there was no compliance or, verification of it. And it just puts our community at such risk. And I think the victims behind the faces of those offenders are forgotten about.
Yeah.
And there's no, once they serve their crime, the victim is forgotten about. There's no notification for me when my offender is not verified or is out of compliance. So that is another thing that I am working on changing, is creating a notification system for the victims that have offenders on those registries, because we're the ones that will hold their neck to the flame of, you better be where you say that you are, because that is our sliver of justice. And if children's, their parents will fight for that, we can stay on the offender for being true and accurate, and on the police department agencies, not DPS. DPS is just the administrator of the database, but it's these peppered law enforcement agencies that are around your state that are the ones that are facilitating the registry yearly, or sometimes it's every 6 months, sometimes it's monthly, but creating a verification system notification system for victims, that if someone's out of compliance, then we're automatically notified. I don't care if a search warrant has been issued or not, or not search warrant, arrest warrant has been issued or not. The victim has a crime victim right to feel safety from their law enforcement agency, period. That is part of, I don't know other states. I know in the state of Texas, and I know my constitutional rights. I actually read mine. Some of our legislators don't, but I know that I have a right to safety, and I have a right to be verified, or to notification when someone is out of verification or hasn't verified or hasn't complied. So changing those laws. And then I think putting accountability back on the local agencies and giving DPS the authorization to do audits. Because if these agencies aren't doing compliance and verifications, how much incorrect information and garbage is on that database. Mm-hmm. And people need to believe that that stuff is true and accurate. So kind of giving our Department of Public Safety in each state the authorization to do audits of the information that they're putting into the system, because they can be held liable too. Mm-hmm. They need to trust those local law enforcement. So I think that it's super important for, again, family and crime victims to know, that have undergone something like this, to ask. You can ask, not request it, mandate it, a protective order for life. Even if the person's just getting a plea bargain and pled to a lesser charge or whatever, if they've committed a crime against you, especially a violent crime, you can request a lifetime protective order and mandate it, that the district attorney puts that in motion to be presented to the judge. The judge, has the ultimate decision, but you can request that and make sure that the attorney does that for you. I am in a different part of my life, a different era of my life, where I did have to learn that my voice can be powerful. And I was fortunate to learn from my family that we have a responsibility to not only ourselves, but to other people to create a better world and, leave it better than how we found it. And I'm trying to leave it better than I found it for every victim out there that has gone through something like this.
Right.
And I'm going to continue fighting until my last breath.
As you should. And I think too, something I've realized with talking to so many people is what happens to them becomes their purpose. Mm-hmm. And even though it is such a dark and traumatic experience that happened, we have a few options. We let it destroy us, we sit in it, or we can let it empower us to help not only ourselves and give us the purpose, but be the voice for so many other people that may have experienced something similar or have experienced it and have felt like they don't have a voice. You become that voice for them.
Oh, absolutely.
And that is so important because especially with this kind of thing, so many people know that it's either brushed under the rug. People have that shame and guilt and that embarrassment that they don't want to talk about it. It's scary and so many other things. So I think the more people that normalize speaking out, the more change is enforced.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Because I think it's something that the justice system knows that I think a lot of people kind of just not want to talk about it, or it's a very uncomfortable topic, especially, it has to do with the most intimate parts of ourselves. So I think that they rely on that so that they don't have to deal with it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I hope my story resonates with someone and they feel empowered to be okay with talking about it and understand that the silence doesn't last forever, that, eventually it's not just stuck inside of you. You can talk about it, and you don't have the responsibility of being too much for other people. This is a part of you, and the right people are going to listen to it, and the people that don't, fuck them.
I was going to say, no, and I think too, like we mentioned before, even just the emotions and the feelings that you went through and the PTSD and the life before and the life after, people that have gone through something similar, even if they can just hear your story and relate to that and know that they aren't isolated or alone, because I do think it takes going through something, even if it is a different type of crime, but going through that and feeling like they have a life before or a life after and they view the world differently. Hearing that perspective from somebody else that's gone through it, I think is another reason for people to feel like, okay, I'm not alone and I can keep going.
Yeah.
Because I'm not one in a million. This happens more often than we think.
Yeah. I also look at, too, if you think about it, like even crimes that especially happen to women. Not saying that these kinds of crimes don't happen to men, but this is primarily women and children that this happened to. Our voices, as far as even social media, is taken away. You can't use the word rape. You can't use the word.
They will push it down.
Yeah.
Even if it's education.
Which is
doesn't matter.
Bullshit. Hard. Because again, it's silencing.
It's taboo subjects too. Yeah. Subjects that make people uncomfortable, so nobody wants to hear about it. Oh, there's a collect group that do,
and as a rape victim, when I hear someone on social media call it grape, I'm just like, sweet, my trauma is now a fruit. Right. Beautiful.
It's very unfortunate. I think that I don't know what social media or media in general is trying to protect
themselves.
Right.
Probably some men on there that might be.
Also, there are people that I think I totally understand, like even how in the beginning you said that this story could trigger people. There's definitely people that maybe those words trigger them, but I think spreading awareness is so important.
Yeah. You know what is so funny? So remember I talked about going through very intensive therapy. I sat in with other rape victims and we would laugh about it.
Yeah.
Like, do they really think that a word is what triggers us?
Right.
It doesn't.
Right.
A word does not trigger us.
Right.
It's, the heaviness of a story that might trigger us. It's our own brains that are what is triggering. It's, you know, I can't listen to heavy metal because, not that I ever did. I was a Sheryl Crow girly, but
it takes you back to that moment. Yeah.
Yeah, it immediately takes me back to the moment. Or the sound of heavy breathing, the sounds of boots going up and down the stairs, because that's the last thing I heard when he left was his boots going down the apartment stairs. Things like that is what's triggering. Words are not, and it takes away when you change, you know, domestic violence into an acronym. You change rape into grape. And I understand it's nothing against the creators, because I know that what's cool is they're still trying to get past the algorithm,
get away
right?
Around it,
yeah, which I 1000% respect.
It's just
it's the fact that the
it's,
platforms allow words like that.
Even this content, all the time, it'll get taken down or it'll be flagged. And I'm like, oh, so girls can be shaking their ass on TikTok and that gets left up. But an educational video of somebody sharing their experience is flagged and is deemed as
sad,
unfit.
Yeah.
Makes no sense to me.
Makes no sense.
But you did incredible.
Thank you.
You are so amazing at sharing your story and the events throughout, and, you know, literally the whole progression before, during, after. I think obviously what you're doing now is so important, beyond important. It's incredible. And if
I wish I could have shared more, like, hey guys, we're doing a big class action suit.
Well, I was going to say, you know, like, please, any links, any resources,
yeah,
send them to me so that we can put them. Yeah. And take your time with it. Yeah. But send it so that it can be in the description for people, whether it's, you know, your personal stuff, resources, anything you're working on, anything you are able to share, please send it so that we can.